Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the numeric data types in Python. Last video we spoke about the string type, which is the textual representation, and today we're going to talk about the numeric types. So first things first, the first data type we're talking about are the integers, and integers are nothing more than the numbers whole or numbers without any floating points. An example of those are on the screen, so 4, -4, and 0. These are examples of integers. Second data type are floats, which you might have guessed are numbers with floating points, like so, and 0.0000. So these are the examples of floats, these are the examples of integers, and lastly, the last data type are the complex numbers, which if you remember from high school are numbers with a real and numbers with a imaginary component to them. All right, so just a quick note, this variable z is different than this variable z if you compare them with logic in Python, which we're going to see in a future video. Python takes into account the data type which you are comparing. So for comparison purposes, they will not be the same thing, although for mathematical purposes, they are representing the same value. As we saw previously, we used the print function to send information into the console. We also use the input function to collect information from the console. And today we're going to learn about the type function, which allows us to receive, it takes in the data type of a certain variable. So let me quickly comment out this piece of code. And let me just create a variable called num, which stores the number 14. If I put inside this type function the variable that I just created and I print out this function as a whole, we're going to be able to see here that the type of the variable num is int, which is short for integers, since it does not have any floating points. You can change the data type in a variable by using something called casting. Casting is nothing more than using a function to convert one data type into another. So if I want to convert this integer number into a float, let me assign it. So if I want to convert this integer here into a float, you would do it like so. You pass the variable which you are converting inside the float function, which is the way to cast it, and then I'll save that into the same variable name, num. And then when I print it out here, you can see that the new class is a float. You're able to do sometimes you're able to do casting, sometimes you're not. For example, you can never cast a decimal number, or rather a complex number, into a decimal because there's no way to represent an imaginary number as a float. So to convert something into an integer, you'd use the int function. To convert something into a float, you'd use the float function. And also, if you want to convert something into a string, you would use the str function, which is short for string. Now, like math, you have all arithmetic operations in Python. We have a sum, and if you print this variable result, as expected, you get the value 8 here. You have subtraction, print, you have multiplication, and lastly, you can see 14, and then lastly, division. You can see here the division went through. Also, you have a few more operations that you can use, and so for example, we have the modulus operation. The modulus operation is a bit more tricky to explain. it simply returns you the undivisible balance of a number, of a division. So for example, if you're dividing 13 by 5, 5 goes into 13 twice, which gives you a left balance of 3, as you can see here. And this is going to be very frequently used in some exercises if you want to check whether or not a number is odd or even. So any number, if you use modulus of 2, it's either going to return a 1 or a 0, and that's going to cue you as to whether that number is odd or even in future algorithms and exercises. You can also do exponentiation. Credit for writing exponentiation on my first try. And the way to represent that is by double asterisk. All right, there you go, 36. And also, you're not going to get the square root. Just a reminder, square root is simply exponentiation of a division. So this is the equivalent of a square root. And also you can do the last math operation, which is the floor division. The floor division gives you the closest integer rounded down to a division. So if you are doing the floor division, 3 divided by 2 would be 1.5, but the closest integer rounding down is 1. Now that we've seen casting and math operations, let me give you a brief example of how casting can be useful. Let's say we're creating a calculator app for our phone and we want to get 2 numbers from user and perform a sum to print it out. Well, so far what we have learned to collect the info from the user is the input function, and just now we saw that we're able to perform addition in Python. So let me just create the first number we want to take from the user is the input function. Let's prompt the user to type something. Let me just copy and paste. Let me change the variable name because I want 2 different numbers. And what is the second number? After that, I want to print num1 plus num2, right? So if I run this code, it's my first number, let's go 5, the second number 7, and I get 57. Well, the reason for that is that the input function gives us a string. And if you just do addition of strings, what's going to happen is they're going to come out like this, concatenated. It's not going to be an effective sum. For me to add these, I have to convert them from strings into numbers. And the way to do that, as we just learned, is by casting. So to do that, I'm just going to cast these numbers into integers. So from now on, the variable num1 is going to store the int version of the previous variable num1, and the same is going to go for num2. And when I run the code, as expected, 5 plus 7 is now 12. Last thing I want to talk about is the combined usage of math signs with the equal sign to simplify our calculation. Let's say you have a variable with the value 4 and you want to add 6 to that variable. One way to do it would be to do this, x plus 6, meaning that from now on the x has a value of 10. However, the same way to do this is to combine the equal sign with the plus sign. And these 2 lines here are effectively the same thing. So just to showcase that, let me comment this out. Print x. So this is not being a part of our code because it's commented. And when I run the code, I get the same value. And you can use this combination of operators in all the arithmetic operations. So let me just copy here from my cheat notes and paste it here. And as you can see, let me just comment all of this out so it's not an error anymore. This operation is, as I just showed, is the same thing as adding 6 to the variable x, and you can do that with subtraction, division, multiplication, floor division, and there's an equal sign missing here, sorry, floor division, and then exponentiation as well. I left a link with, I will leave a link with some exercises for you to check out on the description of the video. And that was it for today. We saw the three numeric data types in Python. We saw casting, and we learned about the type function, which allows us to get a variable's data type. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.